With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
From fast breaks to buzzer beaters to block parties, there's nothing as exciting as basketball. With Underdog, you can bring that excitement to wherever you watch. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players, stats like threes made, points, rebounds, and more. Get those picks right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Millions of fans have won over billions on Underdog. Will you be next? Join in on the fun by signing up for Underdog today using promo code ROOT, and you'll get a free pick as part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Arizona and Massachusetts, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
Welcome back. John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson for Second and Saints. We've taken a little bit of a hiatus, but we got to come back for the good stuff, Ross. It's we're in Indianapolis for the Combine. A lot of good, juicy Saints news to talk about. But, man, first of all, how are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm great. I'm glad to be back at it with you, man. It was good to get a little bit of a break in. I think both of us needed it, but ready to get back to this grind and keep everything going and, only growing from here. So we got a lot on the way. And so I'm just glad to be able to do this again, man. It's always fun to be in Indianapolis. How's it been for you so far?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, this is an awesome place. I hope they never think about actually changing it from Indianapolis because this is just
they keep talking about it
for everything. Yeah, I just don't understand. Like, leave it alone. Like, there's nothing wrong with having it in Indianapolis. It's accommodating. There's plenty to do around here. There's plenty to eat around here. Like, there's just so much diversity, I guess you could say, in having it in downtown Indianapolis. So it's good. So I really love coming here, and it's been great. And of course, I had to miss the Senior Bowl because I had the flu, so that was a bummer. But I was glad to make it. But talking about the Saints, obviously we got to get a lot of intel on Wednesday. I mean, invaluable intel, right? That's one of the biggest reasons we come here. And look, we can talk about all the nuances, all the different things. I think maybe the biggest takeaway, got to be the biggest takeaway, is Derek Carr being the quarterback of this team for 2025. I will say there is a certain show on here who has been telling you for months that this is the likely play. And go back to our past episodes. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe. But Ross, we've said this for months now that was the direction. And since even when they didn't have the right coach in place or the coach in place, like they just had the belief that Derek Carr's a guy. But valuable information that's what the Saints want at least.
Yeah, that's the key thing. Like I know I have advocated for a split between the Saints and Derek Carr. I thought it was the right way for them to go for both parties, right? Does Derek Carr really want to go through a rebuild that the Saints, or I know that they don't want to call it a rebuild, but you're still going through a change anytime that you have a new head coach and all these other things. I know that they're not wanting to say that they're pressing the reset button. I understand. I respect that. But, anytime you have a new head coach, there's a rebuild associated with that, I guess I should say. So does a veteran quarterback who's in the twilight of his career, does he want to navigate that with a team? Or does he want to go somewhere where he might feel like he can compete a little bit more quickly? And then on the Saints side of things, do you invest your time in a guy that's probably going to be your quarterback for one more year? Or do you start investing your time now in the guys that can be your future? So those are the reasons why I advocated for the idea of a split making sense. but it was always with the caveat that that's probably not what the Saints were going to do, right? The Saints have $51 million of cap space invested in Derek Carr this year. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do, is to restructure his contract to help you get under your salary cap overage this year. It doesn't hurt you a ton going into next year because of a post June 1 cut opportunity there. And so it gives you, if you're the New Orleans Saints, the maximum amount of flexibility that you were going to be able to achieve this offseason. And if you're keeping Derek Carr, you're doing it because you intend to compete. And if you intend to compete, you're going to have to spend some money this offseason. And so those two things to me go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I liked what you said about it. It's not about what's the right move for the team and what we believe, because again, we have differing opinions and stuff. Like I'm with you. I think they could have potentially moved on from Carr. We're putting the organization hat on, everything that we've heard from the Saints, all this type of stuff. That's the direction. That's why we're saying that it wouldn't surprise us back in the day and back in months ago that this was the play, right? And so here's the thing, in some of the other things I've heard. So that's the Saints side of it. They still got to figure out the contract, and the contract stuff ain't there yet, right? So that's going to be another thing to tackle, because again, we talked about or look at Kellen Moore's first press conference, kind of non-committal. I think there is a little bit of feels in there, if you will, from everything I was told. But again, they'll move past. They'll figure it out. They'll get the contract done. But again, that's the direction the Saints want to go. And you kind of hit the nail on the head that this team believes that they can compete. They're going to come in here, and Kellen Moore, and the way he was talking, he said he likes the rhythm and the timing for Derek Carr, because that was one of the questions I had is, can Derek Carr run a Kellen Moore offense? Because you look at who he's had, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, even guys like Cooper Rush, or, other quarterbacks that may be a little bit more mobile, you know what I'm saying, and such. But, what I gather from what Kellen Moore's attack is going to be is a lot of different run concepts. And he's same page, I guess, as the Saints, is the trenches have to be there, right? Like, and you look at Philly and what they did, trenches have to be there. And if they can't get a proper run game, which I think is something that would help Derek Carr a lot, is they got to get that run game going. Alvin Kamara's one guy. I get the sense that we probably won't see Jamal Williams back here next season. The Saints are doing their evaluations right now. So, which I appreciate, because it's not something that the front office is just pushing on them and influencing, right? They're letting this new offensive staff and their guys kind of come up, and then they're going to compare heads. But run game's got to be top priority for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I think that everything about their coaching staff additions over on the offensive side tells you that that's the direction that they want to go. John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that we've really seen a run game coordinator on this coaching staff by title. Like, there's always been the guys on the offensive side that have helped to focus on the run game for the offense and things like that. But if I remember correctly, I think this is one of the first times we've ever actually seen like that title given to somebody who I assume, or the title I assume is going to be given to TJ Paganetti, who they brought over from Philadelphia, who held that same role. And so I think you look at that, you look at the reunion with Joel Thomas, the reunion with Brendan Nugent, like all of this stuff points towards a full-on investment in the run game. They're going to have to address their running back room. I'm with you. I've felt and have heard from the very kind of near the tail end of the season, even before the tail end of the season, that this was probably going to be an offseason where the Saints and Jamal Williams part ways. And then so now you have a room that has Alvin Kamara, that's got X-Valide, that's got Jordan Mims, and that's got Kendre Miller, who for all intents and purposes, there's still every question mark about, because his season ended again in injury. And so with all of that, I think that's a position group that you're going to have to invest in if you're the New Orleans Saints. And it's a great draft class for that. There's some free agents, but the free agent class as a whole this year is not super strong. And so I love the fact that there's like 20 to 30 draftable running backs in this year's class, because it feels like that's absolutely a place where they would continue to invest, and that's how you help your quarterback, is give them a run game that they can rely on. The Saints started to do that early last year, but didn't have the diversity they needed in the run game. It sounds very much like Kellen Moore's intent here is to have a more balanced run game, whether it's inside zone or inside runs versus outside runs, zone versus man. I expect a lot of diversity, a lot of balance, and that will help to aid whoever the quarterback, ends up being throughout the season, but will certainly aid Derek Carr early on in the year.
Yeah. And, without giving too much away, Kellen Moore excitement that he had when we mentioned a certain Boise State running back, kind of a little bit happy about that. Look,
Listen, when I asked him about Ashton Jeanty during Senior Bowl week, he lit up. He's the complete package. He can do a little bit of everything, like all this other stuff. The only thing that scares me about Ashton Jeanty right now is him making the decision not to participate at all in the combine.
Right.
He's only doing medicals and interviews. I could feel you if you say, you know what, I'm not going to run the 40. Because he's probably not the 4.3, 4.4 guy that everybody expects him to be, but you don't really have to be successful as a running back. It's just a number that only hurts at that position. But at least go out there and do the field drills. At least go out there and catch passes, which we saw you do a lot of in 2023, not in 2024. That to me was a little bit kind of disconcerting. But 2,601 rushing yards and 29 rushing touchdowns in 2024, the tape speaks for itself.
Yeah, right. The tape don't lie there, right? And it's interesting because you look at, I mean, I think this is a good class for running backs, right? I just think there's some depth there, and we'll get more into that. But again, for the Saints, variety of ways that they can go at ninth. They feel pretty good about their trenches. I mean, they still got to get a left guard, but they're real high on Trevor Penning. They really like what he was able to do. Taliesin Fuanga. I think Cesar Ruiz is one of those guys that can benefit from Brendan Nugent, have a bounce back year. And of course, Eric McCoy. The health has got to stay there. Got to find a left guard. Got to get some solid depth, because I think that's one of the areas where they are lacking severely there. And but it's just going to be fascinating, because I think there's an argument to be made on where they can go at ninth. But again, Derek Carr is obviously the first big thing, the big major thing of the combine. And then where they go from there, we'll see. But I think from there, maybe you can agree we can kind of go from here. But I think the other big thing, or the next biggest thing, is Taysom Hill, his future, because we talk about the run game. Taysom Hill is a big part of that. It sounds like that Hill is a part of the Saints' plans for 2025. He wants to be there, but it's going to depend on the rehab process for Taysom Hill, which is going well from what we were told. But again, there's been a lot of speculation that they could move on from him. Denver's going to come get him. Sean Payton's going to get him, all this other stuff. He won't hit the field probably until late September, maybe early October at the best case, because of his injury. But your take on Taysom, and of course they got to navigate the financials, which there's a plan in place for that.
Yeah, there's a plan in place. That's something that they'll go through and continue to have those conversations. I would expect his contract number to be impacted in some way or another, whether that's via restructure or whether that's via some other type of approach, right? We saw the Saints take this really interesting approach last year with Demario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu, where they took money off the books for that year in 2024, but then gave over future guarantees and future money and things like that. I don't know if there's something like that you can work out with a 34-year-old guy coming off of an ACL tear. I'm not sure, but it's just to show that the Saints aren't just relying on the restructure at this point. They're working on other ways to work through these contracts. I expect them to be creative with Taysom Hill, especially if Taysom's availability is going to be limited in any way because of his injury recovery or through his injury recovery. So that would make sense to be able to do that. The big thing for me is you see all the Facebook stories about Taysom Hill being traded to the Denver Broncos, the Saints cutting Taysom Hill and all this other stuff. This is one of those other things that, like, okay, those got picked up a little bit more than they should in terms of rumor mill stuff. Really the only thing that stands in between Taysom Hill hitting the field in a New Orleans Saints uniform in 2025 is time. That's literally it. It's just about recovering from his injury, rehabbing, and make sure that he's able to come back. Mickey pointed out that he believed that Taysom Hill was having a really strong season going into up until that injury. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. It's all about the timing of the injury. It's not about the efficacy of a Taysom Hill when he's on the field. It's not about interest between Taysom Hill and the New Orleans Saints. Those two want to work together. The only thing that stands in the way right now, or really not even stands in the way, the only question really is when he hits the field and what happens with the contract. That's kind of it, but all that will get worked out.
Yeah, and look, here's the other key things to remember, and we'll probably talk about Cam Jordan here in a second, but Kellen Moore met with Taysom Hill. He met with Derek Carr. So it's like he's having those meetings. Cam Jordan is another one too. So again, you could tell by Kellen Moore, he's kind of, again, we've kind of said this, but maybe not the most outspoken guy. Maybe I think like there's a hidden fiery passion that we will see soon enough, but kind of reserved a little bit and very positive. Like, I mean, you can see why the team hired him. He's not Dennis Allen, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, and just in the sense of he's smart, he's calculated, he's carries himself extremely well, represents himself extremely well. And so, look, he's got a vision for this team. He isn't going to go in there and he's like, this locker room is going to be competitive. Like, that's what he expects. He came to New Orleans to compete. And that's what the Saints want to do, is they want to compete. And I get it. Some people are like, well, just hit the reset button, flush it down, and let's build from the ground up. It's just not where they're going. And again, go back to the past episodes we talked about that. We've talked about this belief that this is DeMario, Cam, and Tyron's last year, potentially. I don't know if they're going to keep all three, but it sounds like they want to keep all three, especially because of the leadership aspect with Kellen Moore coming on. But this could be their last run, quote unquote, to try to make something of themselves. And so injuries were a big part of that, right? That's why they brought in Ted Rath, sports science and such. But there's a will of the way for this team. But I think the way that they're operating is they're going to go for the division. They're going to try to win. They're going to be players in free agency. I don't think that means they're going to make gigantic splashes, but they're going to be more active than what they have been too.
Yeah, I think it's the activity part of it that highlights. Like, here's the thing. The Saints have to build out a 90-man roster. And I think people always kind of forget about that. It's where it's like, oh, they don't have any money to spend. They're not going to do this. It's like, well, they have to. They kind of don't have a choice. Like, they're going to build out a 90-man roster one way or another. And remember, only the top 51 cap hits actually count against the salary cap up until after training camp cuts. So you're going to see additions no matter what. So I would highlight, just like you did, there's a difference between activity and being big spenders, right? You can be active in free agency without going out and signing somebody to a $100+ million contract. But I do think that with the Saints sort of situation, at quarterback now, there is an ability to open up money to actually go out there and spend without really having to touch a ton of those veteran contracts, right? You're probably going to Cam Jordan and making some adjustments there, but you're probably not restructuring that. You don't necessarily have to restructure guys like DeMario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu if you don't want to. There's ways to make money with the younger guys and Derek Carr. And I think that gives you an opportunity to really go out there and potentially spend. Plus, there's still guys on the roster that are taking, like Ben DiNucci's costing the team over $1 million right now. Like, there's all of those little cuts that you can also make that end up making up some headway. So yeah, I do expect this team to be active. I don't know if that means they go out there and make some type of major splash signing. I don't know that it means that, but certainly means I think that you'll see them address a lot of positions of need and potentially some positions of need more than once.
Yeah, and it sounds like the positions of need, a lot of it's going to be on defense. But I think with left guard particularly, you could go to the market and go sign somebody, right? You don't have to go draft. I'm not a fan of drafting somebody on the interior. They're not moving Trevor Penning to guard. I know it's been said 1,000 times or suggested 1,000 times. It's not happening. We've been saying that too since last year.
There's no reason to do it. He looked good at right tackle.
They liked him at right tackle. They thought he had a lot of growth, but that would be, I guess, just segue because you're talking about DeMar. You're talking about Cam and Tyron. They do have to get better defensively. And one of the biggest things, they brought in Brandon Staley. There's going to be a defensive scheme shift, right? They're going to move to a 3-4, but I think it's going to look a little bit different. But that could potentially, what I thought was interesting, change their prototypes of who they potentially target in this draft. But, specifically looking into nose tackle, some edge rushers, some linebackers in this, and I guess the first thing is your take on that. And do the Saints have what they need right now, or where do they need to improve to be effectively run a 3-4 here?
Yeah, I don't think that they need too terrible much. It's just in terms of amount, it's just that what they need is pretty major. And what they need are those the stand-up pass rushers. Now, there's two guys on the roster right now that could probably fill that role. Isaiah Foskey is one of them. And then Carl Granderson's another one. Remember, Carl Granderson came in out of Wyoming as a stand-up pass rusher at 6'4", 250 pounds when he first came into the league, and he's since bulked up to kind of fit the Saints scheme and everything. But both of those guys can absolutely fit that role as internal candidates. And then at nose tackle, you're probably looking at guys like Christian Boyd and John Ridgway are probably the ones that are closest to being the most prototypical, over 320 pounds, over 6'2", all that. Colin Saunders is in there as well, but height-wise is a little bit under the typical prototype, but not to an ineffective amount at all. So I think that they have guys that they can utilize, and other players like Cameron Jordan and I'll mention Peyton Turner, even though he's on an expiring contract and he's out sending out like cryptic Instagram posts and stuff like that. But even mentioning those guys, or even keeping him in mind, like that framework, that big bodied style of edge rusher still has a role in a 3-4 as a 3-4 defensive end. You're just not charged with going after the quarterback as aggressively. You're charged with being a run stopper, setting edges, things like that. But those guys still very much fit. So I think that they have what they need. I think the big thing that they would like to probably add, though, is more production and a proven speed rusher off the edge, a stand up 6'3", 250-pound type of pass rusher, right? Like an outside linebacker type, a Leonard Floyd type. And if you're able to do that, then I think you're in a much better place just in terms of like having the prototypes that match your role. So I would expect to see them invest there. And I would also expect to see them invest at nose tackle a little bit, bring in another option there. And John, I wouldn't be surprised if they invested at inside linebacker as well, because you're going to need really rangy and athletic guys that can take care of the middle of the field, get depth in coverage as well, like continuing to invest there. And like this would be the perfect system for a Willie Gay Jr., for instance, who was not utilized the way they should have been utilized last year, in my opinion, on defense. And look, shocker, right? A defensive player wasn't utilized to the best of his abilities in Dennis Allen's scheme. But like these are the things that I think you're probably going to see the Saints probably try to address. So I think edge, tackle, defensive tackle, and linebacker are probably the three places where, like, yeah, you have talent that can work there, no doubt. But you could also add for sure.
O'Reilly. Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Yeah, and there's interest in bringing back Paulson Adebo and Chase Young, but they're also waiting to fill out that defensive staff, which they're working more interesting to bring in a little bit more of the college feel to it, which is pretty. I mean, I kind of like the direction. I think it can pay off, but at the same time, you're just looking at it and saying, okay, well, what is the vision? And I think the vision is going to come together soon enough, but they got to get better at a few positions for sure. I think safety is a spot where they got to get better. They got to get better play there. Corner. Mm-hmm. I mean, is Alante your guy? What can Brandon Staley do with Alante Davis? What can Terry Joseph unlock with Alante Taylor and such? I don't know. I put them both together or something like that.
Demario Taylor.
Yeah. That's what you get with our show. You just never know. But again, I just wonder, or guys like Isaiah Stallberg, what is his future going to be like?
Right.
They had him at linebacker. And then safety, we talked about his versatility, his hybrid, kind of style, like a Sua Cravens, if you will. That's my old comparison. But
great pull.
It's but again, there's different ways. I think they have some personnel there. I'm interested what Jalen Ford can do. I know he's coming off a major injury,
right?
But I think that's somebody that could fit in that scheme potentially as well. But there's a multitude of ways that the Saints are going to have to address the defense. And I know that they can't keep everybody, right? And everybody should understand that they can't keep everybody, but there's interest there, from Chase Young and, for the Saints as well. But can they make the contract work? What does that look like? And does a defensive scheme shift change much? You know what I mean? So we'll see.
Yeah.
What's some of your other big takeaways? I mean, I know, I can segue, but I'm not going to hog that up. Where you want to go from here?
Yeah, no,
Ross
I think
has control of the board.
I think one of the other things that I'd probably highlight is that even though that we were talking about like some of the needs being on defense, but obviously having some needs on offense. Left guard's definitely one of those spots, but I think tight end is probably still one of those spots as well. Yeah. Sounds like that's a spot that they really want to address. When it comes to Taysom and Foster Morrow both coming off of injury. You have Dallin Holker, Juwan Johnson's a free agent. So I think one of the things that was mentioned was like, yeah, it's probably a place that you're looking at addressing maybe even multiple times. But I think that can mean two things, right? It could be multiple new additions via free agency in the draft, or it could mean in addition via free agency and or the draft, and then re-signing Juwan Johnson, for instance. So finding some way to impact that position group twice makes a lot of sense. We talked about how good the running back class is in this year's draft. The tight end class is really, really good. And with a guy like Chase Hazlitt in the building now, if there are some salary cap cuts, which we're seeing a lot of across the NFL right now, strangely enough, if there are salary cap guys in Houston to guys in Houston like Dalton Schultz, or a guy in Dallas like Jake Ferguson, then all of a sudden, there's kind of a direct line to those guys, or they become free agents next year and then they could be targets next year. But I mean, those are some names that I'd be watching out for as potential cap casualties that the Saints could fall back on if they wanted to go that route. But in this year's draft, there's so much good tight end talent. We talked about the possibilities at 9. Tyler Warren, a possibility at 9 out of Penn State. Guys like Mason Taylor out of LSU. Gunnar Helm out of Texas. Mitchell Evans later on in the draft out of Notre Dame. So Rondé Gatson is one of my favorite ones because I love a Syracuse guy, tight end dude that can do everything, right? Catch, block, run routes, block, like all that stuff is really good. And so there's just all of these kind of all around guys that make sense in a Kellen Moore scheme that has typically leaned on tight end production. And so I think that's going to be another spot that we'll watch this team address.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the thing is, they can go into day 2 in the 3rd round and still get a great quality tight end. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Now, there could be a run, but the thing is, Tyler Warren is kind of one of those dudes, right? And then you're picking 9th. Do you make that choice? Or, defense it's going to depend on free agency, I feel like, right? But, again, the facts are Taysom's injured. He's not going to be hitting the field anytime soon. I'm not 100% sure on the Foster Moreau timeline. I know that's going to be one to figure that one out. Juwan, I know there's a lot of interest out there. This is not a particularly strong free agent tight end group, so he might get a much better offer somewhere else. And so, and they got some reserve future guys, guys like Michael Jacobson, who was a preseason guy that a lot of people came on in training camp some, could he have more of a role? I'd love to see more of Dallin Holker. You know what I mean? We just never really got to see him do much of anything other than go out there and be a decoy pre-snap, pre-huddle, and then only to go off to the sideline. So that was his role.
Right.
But again, this team has a lot of needs. I think there are some things that they like about the youth that they've gone with and the development there. I mean, the biggest thing, if they can stay healthy and they can get the run game and Derek Carr can play pretty good and stay available and defensively, I think that's the biggest thing. Change defensively and be much better because they were not good in the trenches. They were not good in a lot of areas defensively. But the NFC South, I mean, Tampa's still probably your favorite. I expect Carolina to be much better this year. Atlanta, I don't know. Atlanta's a hard team to put a gauge on, right? Because they spent all that money. They try to get all the defensive, pass rushers and stuff, and it just didn't pay off. Guys like Matt Judon and all that, and it just didn't have what it takes. But the Saints could hypothetically get into the division mix, but they got to go play the games. They got to stay available. There's just so many what ifs for them to be able to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. And it's February. Everything's what if in the NFL right now, right? Like that's always going to be the case. And there are going to be things that happen in the draft that people are going to feel good about, things that are going to happen in free agency that people are going to feel good about, things that are going to happen in both those areas that people are going to feel bad about. Same thing will happen in training camp. None of it matters until they hit the field in September. And we don't even know who's hitting the field in September at this point. So we'll see where things go. But it is all what if, right? It is all what if right now. And everything. So I'm very curious to see how the Saints navigate their what ifs into realization. To me, that's going to be like a huge measure over the course of this offseason. What do they want? And do they actually achieve it? How do they actually achieve it? Because most NFL teams in some shape, form, or fashion achieve the thing that they set out to do. We want to address the tight end position. We want to add a nose tackle. But how do they achieve what it is that they're setting out to achieve, right? How far down the option list do they go? All these other things. I think that to me is going to be the most telling part of this offseason. And then we'll see where things go. I think the trade-off in the Derek Carr decision has to be the ability to spend money this offseason. And so we'll see if that ends up coming to reality. The other thing that I think that the Derek Carr thing impacts, John, is it makes me wonder what they're going to do. We had the whole QB2 conversation last year. And so now do you just go in knowing that Spencer Rattler's your second quarterback? And then what does that mean for Jake Haener? Do you invest in another young quarterback? Is this team going to carry 3 quarterbacks on the roster like they have traditionally? Or does that change based on, their new system and everything like that? There's just a lot of those question marks that I'm going to be really interested to find out more about over the course of the coming months.
Yeah, I know. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. And if that fact is we're less than 2 weeks away from free agency. We still don't even have the finalized
don't even know the salary cap. Yeah, right.
Like, huh? You know what I'm saying? Like, what in the world? And look, the restructures news, that's all coming. Like, it'll figure out. The Saints, I mean, it's the yearly thing. And again, it's got to work this year. Like, that's the biggest thing is criticism is valid. It's just the fact that it's got to work this year, right? And then you start to see people back off a little bit. But at any rate, I think the direction of this team, and if you put a bow on this, right, as we kind of wrap up here, is I don't want to sit here and say that they're just charging ahead with what they have, like keep doing what they're doing, but there's just new coaches in place. But in some aspects, it sounds like, okay, we're going to want to keep most of the core that we have intact. We want to keep the leadership that we have. We want to keep the playmakers that we have. We just want to add to it, while changing some philosophy on defense and making sure that our defense is sound and such, but want to go push to compete. And that's the goal for this team. You get any other sense that that's not what their vision is right now?
No, I think that's absolutely right. It's all about the additions that you make this offseason. Like, you're going to try to keep all the leadership together and everything like that. That's fine. But what are you doing to add to it? I think has to be the most important thing. So I think you're 100% right. I think that they have every mechanism available to them to add. They'll have money. They'll have some money. They'll have 9 draft picks going into this year's draft. How do you utilize that to give yourself, that the additions that you need? And then on top of that, I think the other thing, and you can't predict this right now, we won't know until it happens, but you have to find a way to stay healthy. One of the reasons why you needed so much last year is because of how much you didn't have due to injury. And so if you can work yourself into a position to where you have more and need less, as opposed to have less and need more, which is a situation they were in last year, then you're going to be in a much better situation in 2025. And so the addition of Ted Rath is going to have to be an effective one. Hopefully it is. And seeing how they manage what was a multi-reason, I don't know the right word, but like the reason, there was no one reason for why the injuries were the way that the injuries were last year, or have been over the course of the past few years, really, if we're being honest. It was a multitude of things. So how do you address a multitude of things in one offseason? Or can you do that? That would be the other big test.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many different variables. And again, there's reasons to be excited about it. I know
100%.
People aren't going to feel that excited about Derek Carr being the quarterback or anything. But again, look, this is where they currently are. Maybe next year they change their philosophy. Maybe this is the year Spencer Rattler shows a lot of development and can be that guy following. I guess that's my biggest thing is everybody's so quick to be like, what's the next best shiny thing, right? Is okay. Right. Are you giving up on Spencer Rattler that quickly, or are you? That's what's crazy to me is like the same people who would cater for Spencer Rattler are like, here's Jackson Dart, and all I picture is the meme of the guy holding hands with his girlfriend and looking back at the new. Like, you know what I'm saying? Is I think Spencer Rattler can be something, and look, they love Spencer Rattler, but the fact is, I think the way that they're going with this team and the makeup of this team, it's about the veterans and the leadership to help pull them through. And so I think that's kind of the vision for where they believe that they can operate, but whether that it works or not, we'll see. I think cautiously optimistic is probably where I lie on this team. I still don't give them over 7 wins right now. Right. Like, I'm with you. I don't sit here and say they're going playoffs and 10-7, win the division. No, I still think this is maybe at best a 7-win team. Right. I think it could be better, but there's a lot of things that have to go right for that opinion to change.
Yeah. As of right now, it's the exact same team as last year right now with a new coaching staff. And so maybe the coaching staff gives you a couple wins or a different win or something like that. I think it was 5 games that were within 4 points, or 4 games that were within 5 points. Maybe I'm mixing that up, that were losses. And so it's hard to say right now that the exact same team is going to perform much better, but we'll see what happens after they get through free agency, after they get through the draft. What are the additions? What are the things they're doing differently? But installing a new offensive system and a changing defensive system, all in one offseason, typically that's going to take some time. So my expectations in 2025 are going to be growing pains more than anything else. Sure. And then we'll see what they're able to do coming out of that. And then if they surprise beyond that, then awesome. They surprise beyond that. That would be great.
Yeah. And we'll see. We're going to be here for much more of all this stuff. But before we get out of here, and thank you guys again for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Ross, what's new with you since we last talked? What's going on at Locked On, and what's going on at LouisianaSports.net?
Yeah, very same. Just a lot of the grind. Everyday episodes over at Locked On. I've gone to 7 days a week because why not?
Busy.
And then so we'll just keep doing that. I'll have an episode up here on Thursday that just kind of breaks down some of the things that we were discussing, what we learned, what we're hearing here in Indy. We'll dive into, I've been diving into a bunch of the coaching staff hires. Just have a new piece up over on Locked On, I almost said LockedOnSports.net, LouisianaSports.net, around the addition of Bo Davis, the new defensive line coach, as well as like the shifting prototypes and who fits what molds, either on the team, free agency, or in the draft. So all that's available over at LouisianaSports.net as well. What you got coming up over at Athlon?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, I think, since we last talked, as now I am with Athlon.
Oh, yeah, that's
Sports.
right.
Started here at the beginning of February. So, it's been a fun experience. Just kind of get that off the ground. So please go to Athlon Sports and support.
Yeah, go support.
It's me and Bob right now, and hopefully some things will be growing even more for me and such. But yeah, Athlon Sports definitely over there looking at all the coaches, the new profiles, and tons to talk about from the combine, tons to talk about from the draft prospects. I mean, but I'd say immediately shifting gears right after the combine is free agency. Like, this is the big thing where this team is going to go in free agency. Who could they target? What could they do? All that stuff. That's going to be the top priority here shortly. But yeah, Athlon Sports, come support the new venture. Appreciate that.
That's right. And I'll tell you what, John and Bob have been doing an awesome job over there, and top 30 visits and all that kind of stuff. Like, that is a great time to be checking in on all these sites so that you know who's visiting, who's going where, all this other stuff, and then more insight on each and every player as well. So an awesome time to stay locked in on what's going on over at Athlon with John and Bob.
Yep. And same thing with Ross. And pro days. Pro days are coming. So LSU
pro days,
all that fun stuff. So busy March. And so we'll have.
I'm going to see if I can I'm going to try going to LSU pro day this year.
Yeah, same.
I've never been to a pro day.
Yeah, I think. Well, didn't you do one of the local, like the Tulane one?
Oh, I did the local. Yeah,
that's
right.
So, but LSU is like everybody and their mama shows up for that one. So
I'll bring my mama then.
Oh, man. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us today. On behalf of Mr. Ross Jackson, which I don't know, my video just cut out or whatever. But anyways, on behalf of Mr. Ross Jackson, John Hendricks signing out for Second and Saints. You guys stay good, people. We will talk at you very soon. Have a good one.
Love you.